to another Coffee with Samso. We're here at the UWA Club here in Crawley at the University of Western Australia, where we speak with ASX companies and the guys who tell the stories, the CEOs and the MDs. Today we've got Allan Kelly back from Miramar Resources. When they listed, we had a coffee with Samso, and we haven't really spoken to him since then, and love the exploration story. So Allan's always going to give us good quality. So Allan, thank you.
Yeah, g'day.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Mate, Miramar's been exploring away, and when we had that last conversation, I was really surprised that you had such a big package, stone's throw from Kalgoorlie, right in the mix of things.
Yep.
And we sort of talked about, how that came about. But since then, we've done a fair bit of work in drilling. Can you share with us what have you learned?
Yeah. So we've been listed just on 12 months now. We listed back in October last year. So we've been going for about 12 months. We've been really busy. Most of the work that we've done over the last 12 months has been on that Gidjie project, the one that we talked about before. And just to remind everyone, it's only about 15 k's out of Kalgoorlie. It's on the highway, and it's between KCGM or Northern Star at the Super Pit there and Norton at Paddington up the road. So great location. We like to say it's sort of cheapest house in the best street, if you like, on the real estate terms.
Yeah, practically it is.
It is, right? Yeah. So we've been busy. I said over the last 12 months we've done 450 odd air core holes for like 25 kilometres of drilling. We've done a couple of RC holes and a couple of diamond holes, but the main focus has been on the air core. And we've really developed what we think is potential for a new discovery there. We started off just basically following up some historical drill holes with our first air core program, and there was one RC hole that had hit 4 metres at 0.8, and we sort of drilled a couple of holes around that, and that's where we got a 13 gram hit with our air core, and that became the Marylebone target. So then when we followed that up, we started to get more and more hits around that. But then as we sort of drilled further to the northwest along strike, we started to get more significant results. And so now we've basically got about a 2 kilometre long footprint of air core gold anomalism, and some of it's, you'd say it's mineralisation. We're getting hits up to 6 grams, 6.5 grams, 3 grams, 5 grams. But to date, we've basically just still been fleshing out the air core anomaly. So we've been drilling down sort of average depths of sort of 60 metres or so, and consistently getting gold hits at a sort of about 48 to 52 metres, that sort of depth, where the previous historical drilling was only getting down to sort of 30 something metres. So they didn't drill deep. Yeah, vertically. So they didn't drill deep enough to see what we're seeing now. And after that first program or two, we started recognising the similarities between Marylebone and Paddington up the road. Marylebone sits in this Barara shear zone, which is this big regional structure. And down to the southeast of us, you've got Golden Ridge and Barara, where Horizon are about to start mining. And then north of us, you've got Paddington, and then the Barara shear becomes the Bardock shear. So then you've got Bardock and Orabanda and all those sort of places up further north. So it's a major regional structure that we're sitting in, which is the same as Paddington. The geology is the same as Paddington. You've got mafics and ultramafics, and then sort of black flag sediments. There's a dilational jog within that shear at Marylebone, and then there's cross-cutting north-south fault. So all the ingredients are there, the same as Paddington, which produced about 4 million ounces or whatever. And we've got this big footprint. We've got this big footprint of gold in the air core. When we listed, we only had about a third of the Gidjie tenements granted. So we basically drilled up to the tenement boundary of our granted stuff, and we've still got gold right on that tenement boundary. And I think it was about a month or so ago, we got the rest of those tenements granted now. So what we're going to do in November is we'll keep drilling to the northwest as far as we can to see if we can close off that footprint, and then we'll go in with deeper RC or diamond drilling. So, it is, at the moment it's still air core, but you're consistently getting plus 2 gram hits in air core in the right geology. So really the game change will be if we go from those air core hits into bedrock mineralisation, and if we do, then there's potential for something pretty big there. So that's pretty exciting.
When I start doing some research, obviously we haven't spoken for a while, and I have obviously been following you guys, and I see snippets of things.
Yeah.
And I remember when I sat down and looked, and I go, okay, I'll need to make sure I know that the right things to talk about with Allan.
Yeah.
And the first impression I got was, geez, they haven't done really a lot. But so I went into your quarterlies, and that's where the real facts were, in that you guys have as you've just described,
Yep.
the amount of work you've done, the drilling, it just smelt like exploration, like how what I used to think it used to be done.
Yep.
The pinpoint, because a lot of people in the market, and I've said this many times, is that the exploration is not about instant success. That doesn't exist, right?
Yep.
Instant success is a myth.
Yep.
And what I like to see is when you went through there, you did all your air core. I can see some really nice hits. And then then you talked about your RC drilling. This is just your last quarter, so not going further back. And there was some, sort of comments on your RC that you just sort of didn't test what you needed to, and you
wasn't in the right spot.
In the right spot, and that's just again was exploration, right? Because that's what you do. You drill to figure things out.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's exploration. It's not infill drilling of a resource. It's testing a new concept, and you have to collect that data, and you have to be systematic about how you collect the data. That's my view.
And this is more important in this area because, as I've just said to you before we record, mate, I don't understand how you're so close to Kalgoorlie. I drive past there so often, and I used to often look out the window and say, I wonder if there's anything out there.
Yeah.
And so it's more important now because obviously it's a mystery which you need to go and figure out, right?
Yeah. So if you plot up historical drilling at Gidjie before we started work, you just plotted up all the drill collars. It looks like Swiss cheese, right? But what you don't see by just plotting up the collars is that over 50% of those holes are auger holes, and they're 2 metres deep. All right, so you strip them out, okay, and you start looking at the proper drill holes. You then look at those drill holes and you realise that the average hole depth is less than 50 metres. It's like 45 metres or something. They're all angled, okay? So if you've got an angle hole that's 45 metres, well, that's only giving you vertical penetration of maybe 35 or 38 metres. But what we've found out after 4 phases of drilling and 450 holes and 25 kilometres of air core is that there's a pervasive layer of transported material, paleochannel sands and clays and things, and that goes down to about 45, 48 metres in most cases vertically.
Yep.
So all that previous, well, not all of it, but most of that previous drilling didn't get through that transported material to actually see the basement. And we still have problems. If you go back and look at any of our announcements, we keep talking about this silkrete layer that we keep hitting. So within that sort of transported material, sometimes it's this really hard silkrete sort of cement layer. And if you drilled that with a little RAB rig or even a small air core rig, sometimes you're just bouncing off that layer and you can't get through. So we have to be very careful when we're doing our drilling that we always get through down to basement. And sometimes we have 3 hits at a hole. So we'll drill a hole, hits the silkrete, we'll move like 5 metres, hits it again, move 10 metres over here, and then finally get through it, to make sure we actually get that data point in that area, because it's so important, otherwise you just walk away from it. So that was the key, that once we realised how ineffective the previous drilling was, you then start looking at it like a greenfields opportunity. You don't disregard the previous drilling, but if something tells you there's nothing there, you don't just take that for granted. And we've got our AGM next week, and I'm trying to put together a presentation, but I've got 2 slides, and it's like before and after, and there's a big difference from 12 months ago to where we are now. And if you looked at that, you go, oh, there's nothing there. Now we've got all these hits, like right next to previous drill holes that had nothing because they were angled and they didn't get down to the right depth. So you just you can't assume anything, and if you've got a good idea, you need to test the idea. So
the results I see in your air core, and I noticed that you don't make too much of a fanfare, or the market's not getting it, but those are actually very good results, even though they're 1 meter, because you got 1 meter 5 and 6 and etc. and all the numbers, because people forget that bronze ring was discovered less, I think it was 0.25, a composite sample of 0.1 or 0.2.
Yep.
4 meter composite, meaning you got 4 meters mixed into one sample, right?
Yep.
So that's actually, and it was from a RAB hole, which is even the most contaminated samples
that's right.
you could find yourself. But you've got 1 meter at 5 and 6 from air core, right?
So they're resplits, and the original samples were 4 meters at 1.5 grams, or 4 meters at 1.8, or 4 meters at 0.9. But the key for me is not so much the absolute number, but the fact that you're getting it on 2 lines, 200 meters apart, or you're getting multiple multiple holes along a line plus multiple lines, and that's what we've got. So we've got there's at least 4 sort of target zones or structures where we've got multiple holes over several, at least 2 or 3 lines, which are generally 200 meters apart, where we're getting either a gram. Where the 6 gram hits are, we've got 2 holes on 2 lines 300 meters apart, and they've both got 6 gram hits at basically about the same depth. And when you look at the geology, it looks like it's on the contact between 2 geological units. So there's a fault or a structure or something. So you go, okay, there's a reason that we've got these 2 6 gram hits on this structure where they are. And then you got the same with 3 gram hits over here, and you got a completely new target that we outlined just from the last program that's about 1 K long, and it's got 1 gram at each end with 0.5 gram sort of hits in the middle from composites, but that's in the black flag beds. So you've got mineralisation in mafics, ultramafics, sediments, black shale. One thing I'll say is that in my experience in gold exploration, when you see a really big gold camp, one of the signatures of that is that you start seeing gold mineralisation in different rock types. It's not just confined to one rock type like a biff or something. So somewhere like Mount Magnet or something, you can have mineralisation in banded iron formation, you can have it in mafics, you can see it in sediments, you can see it in granite. And that makes me excited, the fact that we've taken this from nothing and now we've got mineralisation in black flag sediments and volcanics, we've got some in black shale, we've got some in these mafics and ultramafics. And just the sheer scale of the smoke plume, which is a bit more than smoke, given you're talking about 3 gram and 5 gram and 6 gram hits, there's got to be something there. There's got to be something there that's giving you that smoke.
I mean, I'm looking at your plan, and you guys talk in that quarterly, you talk about how you found 4 zones, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the drill holes, I'm looking at your lines, and the thing that strikes me is, he just said, is that you're getting those in a line on multiple lines.
Multiple lines, yeah.
And I learned from, talking to a lot of people in younger days, is that you want a discovery, you need that first. Yeah. If you have just one line, one big hit, it's just a big good hit.
Nugget. Could be a nugget.
Could be a nugget,
right?
But when you're getting multiple lines and repetition on the same line, that's when you start to think, I think we've got something here, right?
So I'd say on that, compare hole 96, which was that first hole we did, where we got a couple of metres at 7, and I actually had a photo of a little bit of gold. Compare that to what we're seeing now to the northwest. That was pretty much like one hole on one line.
Yeah.
But up here we've got multiple lines, multiple structures, multiple holes, multiple hits. So that, the vectors are sort of pointing in that direction.
Because I remember when we first spoke, okay, obviously you know, it was our first conversation. I said, look, you know, we went through your projects, and he said,
Yep.
Runway was sort of the I guess the one that stuck up more because
Yep.
obviously you got the numbers and everything else, and
Yep.
so I'm going through this, you know, your information, and I'm going, oh yeah, they've done that, and then I also remember in the first conversation you did say that this was what you thought was the sort of the dark horse,
Yeah.
and you hadn't done much work or done any work at that, at that time. And then as I followed your news, it almost as if like once you got here, you got stuck here because you're getting all these good messages.
Yeah.
And the focus is there because obviously all your drilling seems to be working there.
Yeah.
Structurally and everything else, as you mentioned, it's very similar to the Paddington stuff.
Paddington, Barara, Excelsior, where Bardock are drilling.
Yeah.
It's a very Aphrodite further up, like you were talking about King West. Aphrodite's the same, very similar.
And then and I guess it must be good that you're getting. Talking about structure being similar is one thing, but when you got some essays to follow up,
Yep.
is when and yesterday we spoke to Los Cerros or 2 days ago.
Yep.
Same thing, right? They've got this great big chargeable IP anomaly.
Yep.
And that's again an anomaly like that's fantastic. But
Yep.
when you see the same thing somewhere and you can see that it's mineralized,
Yep.
you get a little bit more excited,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I sort of compare that with what you've just described, and I'm thinking, I think this is a bit more than just a first phase exploration play, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. And when you were saying about how I thought that Marylebone, I don't think it even had a name back then, but was a dark horse. That's based on my experience that if you plot up a pie chart of what rock type hosts gold in WA, it's something like 2/3 or even 3/4 of the gold is hosted in mafic rocks. Now, Golden Mile obviously is a big chunk of that, but mafic rocks, dolerites and basalts and things host a lot more gold than, say, granites or felsic rocks or even banded iron formation, right? So you got Runway, which is black flag sediments and some sort of porphyry, but you got this something up here in these mafic and ultramafic rocks in this main structure. If I didn't know anything about Runway, I would always go for that over something in the felsic rocks. But Runway and 8 Mile was an obvious target because you had this ore body to the south of us. It looked like it was open to the north. There were great hits there, but what always concerned me was that in the space of only so what happened was there was historic drilling south of our tenement boundary, right? And I think about 50 metres south of our boundary was a good hit, 280 metres at 1 or something, although that was down dip. But only about 30 or 40 metres north of that, the 2 holes they drilled hit nothing. And then about 300 metres north on our ground, there were 2 diamond holes and they hit nothing. So I was a bit concerned that what was happening, there's something happening between here and here that we didn't understand. But it was such an obvious target that we said, well, we've got to test it. We've got to test it because if we can get a hit like that, well, that's fantastic. But so we did drill it. We drilled it with a couple of diamond holes and the geology was there. The same geology was there, the porphyry within the sediments and stuff. And we actually got some visible gold in some narrow quartz veins that sat up above it. But the porphyry itself, which was the big bulk tonnage prize, had nothing. Now, but you don't know that until you drill the hole. You can speculate it and arm wave all you want, but until you actually put the money against it and go and drill that hole, you're never going to know. So we drilled it, we got it, we tested it. We can now not die wondering and move on. So I quoted somewhere else. So, that's why they call it drill testing. It's not drill confirming, right? You have an idea, you got to test it. Doesn't mean it's going to be there, but if you don't test it, you lie awake at night thinking about it. You're better off getting out there testing it, and then you can either move forward or move on. So we've had a couple of those, but primarily, I'm really excited about Gidjie. And the other thing, again, just to sort of reiterate that we only just got these other tenements granted, so Marylebone's still open for could be up to 2 kilometres to the northwest. Then there's a gap in our tenements, and then there's more ground. There's about another 2 kilometres. So we've got lots of opportunity to keep sort of drilling along strike and see if we can keep growing it. And I guess we're very nervous about going into RC drilling and that until we've actually closed it off, because we want to make sure that we're testing the bullseye. We're not just testing the edge of it, which is sort of what happened with the previous RC drilling. So there's plenty of work to do there. We'll be drilling there again in November. Aside from that, we've done a heap of other stuff there. We did an IP survey over runway to see if that would help us. We've done ground mags. We're doing more ground mags. We've got a nice target called the Jog, which is a big gravity high. We're going to do some work over that. So Gidjie's been really busy, but we've got other stuff that we're working on too.
Because when I look at Gidjie, where your footprint, and then like you said, you're effectively between Kalgoorlie and Paddington.
Yeah.
That footprint would probably be like Mount Pleasant, right?
Yep.
That
Panglow.
sort of that, because Mount Pleasant is not one hole in the ground; it's a series of stuff.
Yeah, and so is Paddington, but you got Panglow and you got a whole heap of deposits there.
So it's like you said, it's a cap. And when you talk about the Jog, and you got a few that just recently been sort of granted.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at your concept. Okay, you usually said there's an area where you potentially could be another source which is not tested yet.
Yep.
So when I look at that, I mean, this is prime location, right?
Yep.
I just got to keep coming back to this. That it's prime location, and that's, if you were ever wanted to be meticulous in your expression, this is it. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Like I say, the probability of missing something from not being systematic is very high.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity, right?
Compared to being out in the middle of nowhere, right? You're between three world-class deposits, because you've got the Super Pit in Mount Charlotte here.
Yeah.
You've got Paddington here. What's over here? Canowna Bell.
Yeah.
Right? And then you got, it's just, like I say, it's cheapest house in the best street,
I'm looking at it, and it's exploration as you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
And I sort of know your history, so a lot of people may not know that, when you're an exploration geologist, you've got to be meticulous in how you do things. And the most important is drill testing negatives, right?
Yep.
That allows you to close things off.
Yep. And I've said a number of times that, the frustrating thing for me as a geologist and someone who's been in exploration for 30 years as a geologist, geochemist, whatever, is that when you're running a ASX listed company, especially a junior company, a micro cap company, there's always this push and pull between taking time and collecting the data systematically and methodically, and grid drilling or grid soil sampling or whatever, to going and getting a low-hanging fruit and getting the high-grade number that you can put in the ASX announcement to get the share price skyrocketing so you can raise the money, right? There's always this competition between the two, and whatever people think, but I want to make sure that I actually test something. If we've come up with a good idea and then we've got the ground, there's a reason for that. So you want to actually make sure you test the concept, and you want to test it as effectively and quickly and efficiently and cheaply as possible. But the worst thing is to leave something untested and then either drop it or walk away from it. I hate that. So, but on the other hand, once you have tested it, if it doesn't meet your threshold, you also need to be prepared to walk away from it. Because otherwise you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money chasing something that is never going to be something that makes sense, and then that stops you from doing this one. So
I want to talk about that whole 96 situation because I think when we discussed it, that I felt that it's a good way to get people to understand how you think as an exploration geologist. So if you can just run through that, because I think that's a good way for people to understand how we think.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened when we sort of planned up the first drill program at Gidjie? There were some historical holes which I've already talked about that they were really sporadic. They're mostly shallow, but there were a couple of holes that hit, 0.2s or 0.3s, and there was one hole. There was an RC hole, a shallow RC hole. I think it was only about 70 or 80 metres, and it was vertical, but it hit 4 metres at 0.8, including a metre at a gram or something. And these historical holes seem to form a line between runway and the Barara Shear up here. So there was sort of a hit here and a hit here and a hit here, but really wide spaced and not much support. So, and then there was railway over here as well, where it was a 2 gram hit, I think. So we said, all right, we'll do sort of like 400 metre spaced lines up this north-south structure and see what we come up with. So I think we planned like 90 holes as a first pass. We expected them to be about 60 metres deep each. So what's that, 4,500 or 5,000 metres or something. So we drilled all the holes, and we quickly found that there was a lot of paleo channel cover. Some of the holes were ineffective because there was this sort of hard silcrete layer that we kept hitting. We did the 90 holes. We were short on metres because the holes were a bit shallower than we thought. So it was at sort of the last ditch, we had a few days up our sleeve and a few metres up our sleeve. And where that RC hit there was 3 sort of RC holes in a fence that progressively got deeper and the grade sort of got better. So I thought, and there was a bit of gap. There was a bit of a gap underneath them to the west. So we said, oh, well, let's see if we can just bang a couple of holes in there, fill that gap in, and just see what it looks like. So we quickly got a line cleared while the guys were out there, and we drilled hole 95, and that hit the silcrete layer. And the guys tried and tried and tried, put the hammer on, and they couldn't get through it. And they rang me up and said, oh, what do you want me to do? And I said, oh, I'll try the next one, see how you go. So they drill hole 96, which is like the one basically closest to the RC hole. And they hit this same silcrete layer. And they try and they try and they try. And eventually, after about half an hour of banging into this silcrete layer, they finally get through it. So they drill down, they get down to the base of the paleo channel, and they go into some nice looking ultramafic, and then that's the last hole of the program. Okay, so okay, right, we've done our 96 holes, let's see what happens when we get back. So Marion Bush, the technical director, she's been collecting sort of bottom of hole samples in little sandwich bags and anything that looks a bit interesting. So she brought them back to the office and said, oh, this hole 96 looks a bit interesting, and it's right next to the RC hole. So we grabbed it out, and it's oxidised clay and there's bits of quartz in it, and we go, oh, this looks pretty interesting. So we grabbed a pan and we just went out the front of the office in South Perth and chucked a bit of water in, pan it up, and there was a bit of gold in there. Oh, okay. So we see a bit of gold, but couldn't tell whether it was alluvial gold or in situ gold. Sort of didn't really matter at that point. And the quartz vein's really chunky, like really sharp, angular. So if it is transport, it hasn't gone very far. Mm-hmm. But the gold's sort of rounded off. So that could have happened in transport, or could have happened as part of being drilled. So you don't really know. Yep. So then we got the results back, and it was 4 metres at 0.3 or something. And we're going, oh, that's a bit strange, but it's coarse gold, nuggety gold. That's typical. So when we did the resplits, it came back at 2 metres at 7, including a metre at 13. So you go, okay, well, it's coarse gold. Yeah. But I guess the point is that that hole then became the impetus to then follow up Marylebone. And that hole wasn't even part of the program and was added at the last minute because we had a couple of holes and some metres up our sleeve. And it was a hole we drilled after hole 95, where the guys are scratching their heads and trying to get through this bloody silcrete layer. And then went, oh, we better drill this next hole, just have a look at it. And then they hit the silcrete layer again and struggle with it for about half an hour. So the drillers want to stop, and you're like, no, we better test it. So I guess the point is that, we talked about it before, how fickle exploration can be. It can be something as stupid as that, where you just decide to add a couple of holes on, and then you struggle with a siltcrete layer, and then someone wants to go home early or something, and you decide, it's too hard. But then that was then the hole that then made us want to go back there, and now we're looking at this position where we've got 20 or 30 holes with plus 2 gram hits, and it's still open, and we think we might be on the verge of a decent discovery. So
you've got two factors there that straight away I'm thinking female, a hole that you weren't going to drill, or the last hole. If I'm not mistaken, that's Nova.
Yep.
And Sandfire. Or
yep.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's two.
Yeah.
So you got two.
And also Bronzewing. Bronzewing, I think they had to drill up to a fence line, and they couldn't get us across the fence line, so they had to drill somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right?
So, but what was it? A female?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
don't know that
you
one.
Got the two.
Yeah. Margie Hawks.
Yeah. So and now you got what? I mean, I'm looking at it. This is pretty much, I know you're a bit conservative using the word discovery, but I'm looking at this, I'm thinking you've got something there.
Oh yeah, I think we have. In my gut, I think there's something there. I'm sort of reluctant to talk about discovery at the moment, because a discovery to me is economic grade and widths in bedrock mineralisation. But we haven't even considered the fact that there could be a supergene deposit there, right?
Yeah.
So Panglow, I think it was about 200,000 ounces, but that's a supergene deposit. Yeah. It's not in the bedrock. They might have mined some bedrock, but effectively that was a supergene deposit, where Paddington's actually mostly a primary deposit. We haven't even considered that yet, but I was just doing some, I was sort of going, if you did a back of the envelope, if you had 300 metres and you had, a layer of sort of high grade, what would it need to be to actually be an economic supergene deposit? So I haven't even looked at that yet.
Yeah, I mean, you got all sorts of restrictions to the ASX and stuff, mate.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this, I'm thinking most people be happy with this.
Yeah, you don't see that much smoke without some reason behind
it's
it.
more than smoke, mate. You can see a bit of flame there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's the 1s and 2 grams and 3 grams and 6 grams, they are indications that there's something going on. And like I said before, the fact that you're seeing mineralisation across different rock types as well.
And the key to me is you're seeing it in bedrock, right? If you said to me this is all supergene, okay, it could be anywhere, right?
Well, the challenging thing for me, and that's what makes me a bit hesitant, is that the results are routinely coming from this sort of 48 to 52 metre mark, which is like the interface between that transported material and the weathered basement. So some of our hits are sort of in that, in the paleo channel, and some of them are definitely in the basement, in the weathered basement, but some are somewhere in between, and we're not quite sure. So that's why I always make a point in the announcements of talking about whether we get a silver hit. So if we get a gold hit with a silver hit, to me we're in the basement, or sort of just in the basement. If it's high grade gold but nothing supporting it, no silver, no arsenic, no tungsten or anything like that, or tellurium, then we're probably up here. So I'd say I was still a bit unsure about hole 96, but I'm more certain about the ones to the northwest, that we are seeing bedrock related mineralisation. It's not transported stuff in the transported material in the paleo channel. So, but still, it's still early. We're still working this out. So,
do you guys have an understanding how the profile is, the bedrock profile?
Yeah, it's stripped. So, and that makes it hard, right? So effectively, if you sort of looked at it through history, you'd say, right, you had the mineralisation in the bedrock, then you had a regolith developed, laterite weathering profile developed, which is like typical Western Australia. But then after that, you've then had this sort of paleo channel come in, and it's stripped off that weathering profile. So where you would normally, if you were, I don't know, up near Leonora or somewhere where you get a nice sort of mushroom, the classic sort of mushroom anomaly over the top of the mineralisation, we don't see that because that's gone. That's been stripped off. So you're literally only seeing a metre or two of weathered basement before you get into fresh rock. Okay. So that means the potential for any sort of big supergene gold halo is gone. So that's why you have to be careful about your drill spacing. Your drill spacing, if your drill spacing's too wide, then you won't see anything. Now we started off at, about 400 by 100. We used historical drill lines as a bit of a guide. And then we're at the moment we're down to about 200 by 50. That's what we're trying to get to. Some of the stuff's still 400 by 100, like the new stuff, but sort of in the main part of Marylebone we're down to 200 by 50. But that's still pretty wide. And if you look at the stories of things like Invincible on the Salt Lake at Kambalda, you know, they were having to drill sort of 20 metre spaced holes to see that. Because if your big plume is stripped off, then really all you're looking for is like the little top of the thin bedrock bit and maybe a little bit of local movement on top of that, and that's what we're looking for. So, you know, if you're really, you know, systematic, you'd probably go back in again and be drilling at 25 metres. So. Again, this is this like push-pull that I'm talking about. There's some areas that I would like to go in again, but I reckon we're sort of almost at the point where we could drill them with RC.
So going forward, I guess for here,
yep.
You know, you mentioned that you got pending essays and you got a drilling program coming up in November, right?
Yep.
So whereabouts are we talking about here in terms of the plan that we're looking at? To the northern.
Yeah. So basically, if my hand was Marylebone, and it sort of goes northwesterly, that's where the previous tenement boundary was.
Okay.
So we're going to extend that as far as we can to the sort of gap in our tenements, and then there's a few infill holes sort of in here as well that'll get it to 50 metre spacing, and then all going well. If we close it off to the northwest so that we're comfortable that we sort of know where the bullseye is, then the next step is RC drilling underneath it. So we're also doing a ground mag survey. We did a ground mag survey in the main bit, and that showed us the geology quite well. So we're extending that to the northwest as well. That will help us with our air core interpretation of the basement geology. So because you've got these mafic and ultramafic units that have got quite different magnetic signatures, but it also importantly shows us those north-south faults, which are important at Paddington as well. So
I think I agree that there's if you use the term economic discovery, you have a bit from there.
Yep.
However, if you've got a place to chase economic discovery, I think you found it.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. All the ingredients are there, and we're seeing the fact that we're seeing consistent hits on lines, between lines, that seem to relate to bedrock structures, tells me there's something there. There's something there. It's.
I mean, you've also got other projects, I guess, and I get that focus is here. And
well, Glandore, but don't discount Glandore. Glandore, we haven't talked about it because we've only just started working there. But we bought Glandore off Anglo Gold Ashanti for 100 grand cash, and people have asked me to compare Gidjie and Glandore, and I say, well, Gidjie's obviously in a fantastic position, but Glandore has got some fantastic historic results there.
Yes.
So and our views change there too. So it's worth sort of talking a little bit about Glandore. So Glandore's east of Kalgoorlie, 40 k's east of Kalgoorlie. Most of it's under Salt Lake, Lake Yindalguda. So that's made it harder to explore.
And good now though.
They're good now. Yeah. We're about 8 k's north of where Black Cat are about to build their mill. Yeah. And to the south of them, Silverlake have got their mill at Salt Creek, right? Yeah. So we're in a good spot in terms of infrastructure and everything. But the basic geology of Glandore, you've got this mafic sill complex, which is again a bit similar to Kalgoorlie, and then there's this little granite plug. So the dolerite and the gabbros that go around this granite plug, and the previous work that had been done there was on the eastern side of this granite, and there were air core hits that were done on the lake, and they were like 1-2 gram hits. So good air core hits over 2 kilometres, okay? So similar scale to Marylebone. And then Harmony did some diamond drilling in 2005, and they got that only shallow holes, but the thing on the lake, you pretty much got to go to from air core to diamond, because you can't take an RC rig out on the lake with compressors and
It'll
that.
sink, right?
Yeah, so they took a lake diamond rig out there, and they drilled a couple of these bits on this sort of eastern side of the granite, and they got up to 6 metres at 30 grams.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
In these veins on the contact between the granite and the mafic rocks. And then some stuff happened with Harmony, and then it was Integra and Avoca and Silverlake, and you know, all these things happened, and it sort of got forgotten about. Anglo Gold Ashanti grab it. They then go follow up the Harmony hits. They got some 3 and 5 gram hits in their diamond, and did a bit of air core. They said, oh, it's too small for us. Nothing big enough for Anglo Gold Ashanti. So they sold it to us. So we go, okay, well, there's a couple of obvious targets there. There's following up the diamond hits, but there's this whole western side of the granite that's like a mirror image that hasn't been drilled at all. So again, it's this: do we go for the low-hanging fruit and go drill one diamond hole under a diamond hit, or do we be systematic and go, we think this whole area here's not tested, and we can do a few bits down here? So that's me going, right, let's be systematic. So we did air core drilling on the land on the west side of the granite, and see what we come up with. So we did some stuff on the land bit first, because we had the rig, got some 2 gram hits, went, okay, that looks interesting. But guess what? The 2 gram hits line up in a northeast trend, and if you draw a line across the lake, that's where the diamond holes are. Okay, that's interesting, because we were thinking it was going to be more around the west side. Anyway, so we do the lake program, and we said, okay, we'll better add a couple of lines across this granite in between these 2 gram hits and the diamond hits. Well, we saw quartz veining, we saw sulfides, we saw alteration. So we go, okay, hang on, the story's changing a bit here. Well, 8k south of us, where Black Cat are, one of the main deposits they're going to be developing is the Majestic deposit, which was an old Silverlake discovery. Integra, Silverlake, you know. It's about 500,000 ounces, that deposit. And guess what? It's a northeast trending structure in a granite with high grade. So the thinking's changed now about Glandore. And there's another deposit that Black Cat owned that they bought off a rumour called Trojan. And guess what? That's a granite with a northeast structure, and it's about 150,000 ounces. So that's what we're thinking now. We're thinking that diamond drilling just sort of touched the edge of the granite and got those hits, and no one went into the granite. And we've got these hits down at the southern end, that's sort of on the edge of the granite, and we can see the structure in mags and stuff running through there, and there's no drilling been done there. So those air core assays should start to come in over the next couple of weeks. And if we start to see hits in that granite in between the land air core drilling and the diamond drilling, then that tells us that there's potential for like a Majestic or something there. So that will be the focus. So, you know, again, I didn't want to rush straight into diamond drilling when there might have been something better to test. So we can always go do the diamond drilling. We're not going to not do it. But I wanted to make sure that I understood the bigger picture of the project before we suddenly went into, you know, jumped straight to diamond drilling. So that's what I guess people got to understand that.
I mean, when I look at your market cap, 10 mil, right? And I'm fascinated, and I'm really into this whole exploration thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of upside if you found something, right?
Well, okay, so here's a recent example. Apollo found 1 million ounces at Lake Rebecca, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what their market cap was a week ago, but they just had a bid from Ramelius that values at 160 million.
Yeah.
And now Gold Road's come over the top. right, with a cash bid.
Yeah.
So if you find 1 million ounces, well, that's the sort of market. If you've got 1 million ounces of a decent deposit that looks like it's a development prospect, well, there's your upside from where we are now.
I mean, Marylebone to Gidjie, you don't need 1 million ounce.
No.
Yeah?
No, you don't. You don't. But we're not looking for 50,000 ounces at Marylebone. We're looking for half a Paddington or a quarter of Paddington, which would be about 1 million ounces, right? That's what I think the potential prize is there. Yeah. If we come up with 500,000 ounces, I'd still be pretty happy.
Oh, I think
at
so.
Glandore, I think there's potential for things that are maybe 250 plus, which would be fantastic where it is, right?
I mean, look,
it's huge upside.
I've always said, you want to find those big things, you've got to go out and do what you guys we've just talked about.
Yeah.
And I think that's very few people are doing it.
Yeah.
There are people doing it, and obviously it really balances. No, as you've just described, right? It's balancing about how fat your wallet is, as opposed to how bold or persistent you can be. It's always a balancing act. Right.
Yeah. We've got about we last quarter we've got about $4 million in the bank. So we started with 8 for the IPO, and after you take out all the costs of the IPO and everything, I think we started with about 7. So we've spent $3 million in the last year, of which 75% of that has been on the ground, on drilling. You know, I'm the only full-time employee. We've got a couple of part-time people working for us. We've got a small office in South Perth. You know, we're spending money on the ground, you know, and we've got $4 million. That is still going to get us a lot of work over the next sort of 6, 8, 9 months. So, you know, I don't want to raise any money until we're ready to raise money and we've got something to raise it on, and we've got to, you know, can get a decent price. I don't want to dilute our shareholders unnecessarily. So, you know, what frustrates me is that, you know, we've been listed for 12 months and we've been busy, and there are companies that listed about the same time as us that haven't even drilled a hole. Now, I don't know for what reason, maybe permitting or whatever, but we've been out there on the ground testing ideas, testing concepts. Not every hole is successful, but the vast majority of them have been, and they've actually developed a prospect.
Well, it's a story building exercise.
Yeah.
And I must say that now that you've, you know, sort of delineate how the money and funding and spending is, that it did occur to me that you've done a heap of work. So I looked at your cash balance and I think, geez, it's done a heap of work, because drilling those holes are not cheap, right? And to have that balance at this point in time, you know, you being the only full-time would explain a lot, because you know, wages, and I've run companies before, wages is a big killer on
We've got a board of 3, which is the minimum you need, right?
Yeah.
And one of them is me, and I'm effectively doing 2 jobs. I'm doing the job of a chairman and the MD. So, and then I've got a part-time technical director and then a non-exec director. And, you know, I've got a part-time person to help me in the office. We've got a contract geo and a couple of fieldies that are sort of on part-time contracts as well. So we want to spend the money on the ground. We don't want to spend it on overheads and things. So, you know, that's how you find stuff, is by drilling holes, not by, you know, going to conferences.
Or having lunches.
Or having lunches, right? So, yeah.
But Allan, look, it's a fantastic story. I mean, I knew we were going to get a good story, and I was going to, and you know, you've, true to your caliber, you've provided us, and look, Samso is all about trying to get people, the retail side, to understand what we do.
Yeah.
And I think going through this process of talking about exploration the way you would do over a coffee. You did get coffee today.
Yeah, I did get coffee today.
And so it's really what I've been trying to achieve with the series, is that to get people to understand and really focus on, you know, like I use this description, you know, like the chicken out of coals. Chickens don't come from coals. There's a process involved. But look, Allan, fantastic. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no worries.
Any last words to people out there?
I'll just say that, you know, we're 1 year in. We've been really busy. As I said, most of the work has been at Gidjie. because that was the project that was available and granted to work on. But we've got lots of other things going on. Glandore's sort of starting to kick off. We're waiting on assays from Glandore. This will be really interesting and exciting to see this first lot of assays. We just got our third project granted a little while ago, Randalls, which is in the Eastern Goldfields as well, right next to Silverlake, folded banded iron formation. We've got a haul road running across the middle of our project and basically not explored. You know, we've got plenty of work to do over the next 12 months. Hopefully, you know, this time in 12 months' time, we're at the point of drilling a discovery. You know, we're drilling out a resource. That's where I would like to be. I'd like to be at the point where we've found something and we're actually drilling it out, and you know, RC diamond or whatever. So that will really be the goal for the next 12 months, is to get Gidjie and Glandore up to the point where we think we've got something that we're drilling out. That's where I want to get to.
All right, fantastic. Look, you know, with a 10 mil market cap, I think it's
EV of like 4 or 5 mil.
One discovery, and I think there'll be a lot of happy shareholders.
Someone said to me yesterday we could probably do 4 IPOs on the projects that we've got right now.
Yes, I can see that too.
Yeah.
But look, Allan, thank you, and it's been fantastic. Great.
Yep.
I hope there are no technical issues with the video, but I'm looking forward to getting this out.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No
Thank
worries.
you.
Great. Thanks a lot.